Hello everyone, and thank you very much for watching. This is me, Mr. P, and this is another episode in the Proxmox Home Server series. In this video, I'll show you how you can virtualize Ubuntu Server, and we're going to use that Ubuntu Server to host all our Docker containers. So in this video, I'll show you how to set up a Ubuntu Server virtual machine inside the Proxmox, how to install the docker-compoe, and how to link a NAS or SMB share to the Docker to that Docker VM or Ubuntu VM to have a persistent storage for some of the Docker containers. Not all the Docker containers will have a persistent storage, but most of them will do. Like for example, Plex, you want to store the media somewhere else, not inside the Docker, not inside the VM that will run the Docker, because the storage will blow up. So that makes sense to have media folder, all your Linux ISOs somewhere else, like on a NAS or basic SMB share. So my setup is quite simple. From all the previous videos I demonstrated all the different setups and etc. I reduced all down to two. So one is the Cloudflare tunnel to be exact, and this runs Cloudflare tunnel and links to my Cloudflare account, and I have the domain assigned to this, so it's mrpcloud.uk, and as you can see here it says pve-yt. So if I hit this subdomain, I will get to my Portainer, to my Proxmox. And next one is the NAS. This is a file server LXC container. Runs here. I've done a video for both of them, how to get those set up in the previous videos. I'll leave links to those videos in the description below for you to go and get same setup as you can see here right now. And this is pretty much the file server LXC container running webmin. And I have Samba server set up with ZFS, and ZFS is two drives that are attached to this Proxmox. So if I click here, as you can see, there's a ZFS or zpool by the name of Tank, and there is two drives, 256 gigabyte drives, assigned to this Proxmox, and the two drives. If I go in shell and write ZFS list, one of them is Tank Proxmox or dataset Proxmox, and another one is dataset data. So Proxmox is linked back to Proxmox, and it acts like my backups, ISO file location, CT template location, and rest of the stuff. And the data is being mount pointed to the file server LXC container into mnt/ZFS. And if I click here, and I'll show you quickly, if I go to mount and ZFS, and this is the folder. So pretty much all this, what I'm just demonstrating, you already done videos about it. So this is the setup that I'm going to use from now on. Basically just a Cloudflare, get my subdomains going, and some sort of a NAS. You can use TrueNAS if you want. I've done a video about TrueNAS as well, but this is just going to be my starting point. Two containers, two LXC containers, simple LXC containers, nothing fancy, 512 megabytes on this and 512 megabytes on that. And both of them has one core, and that's it. So let's start setting up ourselves the Ubuntu server. To get Ubuntu Server ISO files, I'll leave a link in the description below, which will take you to this page. You just click on the downloads and get Ubuntu Server. Click on this big green button, and wait for a second for pop-up to show up, because it's just gonna try to automatically download to your local machine after 5 seconds. I'm just gonna cancel that, and then right-click on a download, copy link address, go back to a Proxmox, select the storage where I keep my ISO files, download from URL, or if you download to your local machine, you just click upload and then select the file from here. I'm just gonna do the direct download. If I click query the URL, this is the file will be saved. You can rename this to say just Ubuntu Server -22-04 and delete the rest of the stuff if you want, and leave like this. I already downloaded this file, as you can see it's here, and that's the one we're going to use. We're going to use to get the Ubuntu setup. So to set up the VM, I'm just going to click on the big blue button here. It says create VM. Incremented number to 102. 100 used, 101 is used, so 102 is just fine. And now give it a name. I will name it docker-yt. That will represent the Docker containers and everything that runs inside. OS select the storage where you keep. Is it local or whatever else you have? Mine one is called ZFS. And this is the drive we're going to use. Under systems, everything stays by default. Under disks, 32 gigabytes is okay to have about, let's say, up to 10, 15 containers with persistent storage to being somewhere else. I suggest you have at least, if your system allows, 64 gigabytes, because some of the stuff will start accumulating. If you're going to run 30, 40 containers, the stuff will adds up. And obviously, please don't forget that each container will have to have an image or Docker image. And so that means, like, if you have 30 containers and each image is gigabyte in size, so that's 30 gigabytes already gone without even adding any of your own data. I know that this VM will run inside SSD, so I'm going to click SSD. And discard, I will write this because it is SSD, so I want to make sure that it's going to be most optimal read and write performance. Everything else by default. Under CPU, I suggest to start with 4, minimum 4. 2 is okay. 2 is okay as well. 4 is a minimum. Actually, I'm going to leave it 2 just to show you how everything performs. Memory, if you click advanced options here at the bottom, make sure that for you to see both of them. If you have, make sure you put 4096 and 2048 here. So that means it's going to be a Boolean device. It's going to fluctuate the RAM usage between these two. And minimum memory, you're just forcing the system never use less than 2 gigabytes of RAM. Network, everything stays by default. And config, everything is fine. I'm just going to click finish. And wait right now for Proxmox to get everything set up done. You can see the Docker VM has been created, so I'm just going to click on that and press start now. So let's wait for Docker for Ubuntu Server VM to start. Here we go. So it tells me that this automatic will select this in 25 seconds or so. I'm just going to use arrow keys to make sure that is selected and press enter. And right now the Ubuntu Server VM will do the initial setup process. That will take 10 seconds or so. So let's wait for that to finish. And here we are. I've been presented with the setup screen. I will select English brackets UK, press enter. Check if the keyboard layout is correct, and then make sure that done is selected in green color and press enter. And now it's telling me which base or which kind of style of Ubuntu Server I want to install. Do I want to install everything? Do I want to install the minimal? And then search install the third-party drivers. I'm going to use Ubuntu Server. You can install Ubuntu Server minimized. That means it's just going to install a base minimum stuff for Ubuntu Server to function. But then in the future, you're going to have to install a lot of things yourself manually. So I'm just going to install everything as what by default Ubuntu Server provides. Make sure that done is selected and press enter. IP address I will be given is 157. That's fine. Press enter. Proxy address, there is no proxy address, so I'm going to press enter. Now we're searching the default mirror address and checking if everything is fine with this. Let's wait for this to finish. That's it. This mirror location passed the test. Press enter. And now, very important thing, make sure you deselect the setup this disk as a LVM group. You select this, as you can see, it's a blinking underscore icon here. Press space and deselect that. When I was installing this for the very first time and I left this by default, I wasn't getting all the 64 gigabytes. I was getting about half of that, probably a bit less than half. So make sure you just select that and make sure, and that will give all the storage to Ubuntu Server without breaking the disk into different partitions. And now I'll use arrow keys to go down to done and press enter. And that's it. Gives you a quick brief information exactly what's going to happen. So it's going to delete, install, format, and etc. And we're going to use all or almost all 64 gigabytes because it's going to use some of them for the BIOS and other things. So 63.9. Select the done, press enter, and it tells you really want to do this. I'm going to say yes, continue, and press enter. Your name, give it the name give it the nickname or name of this system. Then what's the server name will be docker-yt. Username will be Mr. P, and password I'm just gonna enter something simple. Something simple. What's the word? Simple. Can speak. Anyway, it's done is selected, everything is filled, press enter. And now it tells you, do you wanna basically go with enable Ubuntu Pro? I'm just going to skip for now and press enter. Make sure you select install SSH because you want to SSH into the system once it's all set up and running. It's going to be much easier to go by SSH client than going by this web GUI, because you can't copy and paste stuff from your, let's say, websites, GitHub and others into this screen, because Proxmox will not allow. So install OpenSSH server, select done, and press enter. It gives you a couple of programs as a suggestions to install during this installation process. You can see there is a Docker here. I will install Docker myself manually. I'm not going to select this. I'm just going to go all the way down to the done and press enter. And now installation started. This will take about 2 minutes or so. Wait for installation to finish, and once installation is finished, you will notice below the view full log is going to be reboot now option. During installation process, it's going to say cancel, update, and reboot. Don't select that. Wait for actual, like this one, cancel, update, and reboot. Wait for actual brackets and reboot now option showing up. So we'll be back when this option shows up here. The option showed up, so it says reboot now. I'm going to go all the way down here, press enter. And now Ubuntu Server will complain that ISO file is still mounted. You just press enter on that, and Ubuntu Server will restart. So while this is restarting, we can get ourselves the terminal running. And now you can see there is a bunch of stuff happening with SSH keys and etc. And it feels like it's actually stopped and maybe crashed, but it's waiting for you to press an enter. If I press enter, I get the docker-yt login screen, and I can log in from here. So Mr. P and the password I gave it, and IP address was 157. So I can jump into my SSH and just write Mr. P in an IP address, local IP address of this VM. Is it was in 157? Yes, it was. Press enter, accept the fingerprint, and that's it. I am logged in into this VM. So right now, quick thing you need to do on the first login onto this virtual machine is apt update and apt upgrade. You need to write sudo because this is a user, not a super user. So, and && sudo apt upgrade -y, and run that, provide your password, and that's it. And right now it's going to get all the stuff done. So let's wait for this to finish. With Ubuntu Server, when you're installing, updating packages, it's going to ask you, do you want to restart certain services? I'm just going to leave this selected by default and press OK, or select OK and press enter. And that's it. The update and upgrade has been done. Next step, let's install Docker and docker-compose. So again, sudo apt install docker space docker-compose space -y to auto accept the prompts. And let's wait for this to get all installed. Again, I get the message saying, do you want to restart this? I'm going to just select OK. And that's it. Docker is installed. To double check, if I type docker-v, I'll get the version. So Docker is installed, and I think docker-v on compose should give me a docker-compose version as well. So version information showing up, that means the Docker and docker-compose is installed. First thing, or next thing, what we need to do is get ourselves Portainer running. Portainer is a web GUI interface to manage your Docker containers inside the server. Obviously, you can go and start doing all these things with the docker-compose commands inside CLI. I found that some of the things I still do inside the terminal. Others I prefer to use Portainer because everything is much easier to read and understand what is linked to what. So we're going to use Portainer for manage our Docker containers. First, we need to get ourselves a docker-compose.yml file created, as we're going to use docker-compose to initialize the Portainer container. I am logged in as a user, so home/ and the username, in my case is Mr. P. I will create a folder, which is going to be called Docker, and I will change directory to Docker. So all the stuff that I will use in the future for Docker containers and etc. will be located in this folder. In here, I need to create a folder called Portainer. And in the future, if I want to run another container or something, I'm going to just start creating folders inside this folder representing each of the containers. Change directory to Portainer. And inside here, we need to do a couple of things. First of all, make directory Portainer-data. This is where Portainer container will store the data. This rhymes a bit. And next one is we need to do touch and then write docker-compose.yml. So we have a docker-compose YML file, and we have a folder to where Portainer will store this data. Now let's amend or edit the docker-compose.yml file using nano. And I will copy and paste the docker-compose instructions, and I'll leave those in the description below for you to go copy and paste as well. So pretty much this is the docker-compose instructions written inside the YAML format. The spaces and indentations is very important for YAML file. So we're going to use the docker-compose version 3. We're going to run service, or it says services, but we're going to run service. It says services because you can add more below if you want to. So let's say it's going to be something here like Pi-hole, and then carry on setting everything up. So we're going to run service called Portainer. We're going to use this image. So we're going to use a Portainer, the community edition, the latest version. Container name will be Portainer. You can rename it. You can change to whatever you want. Restart will be unless stopped. So Docker will attempt to restart the container if it crashes. But if you as an admin will physically stop this container, it will basically stay stopped. Security options, no privileges. So that means container will not get any privileges to host. Volumes, these two is going to retrieve the information from the Docker. So it's obviously going to take the real time and then get all the information from the Docker. And this is ./Portainer data. That's why we created this folder to store Portainer data. And dot means it's current folder, and this is a subfolder. And port number 9000, I suggest that to leave as it is. This is by default widely known port for Portainer. So 9000 on the host side and 9000 inside the Docker. So leave this as a 9000. So that's it. I press Ctrl X to close, Y to write, Enter to confirm. And if I CAT or cat this file out, I'll get all this output showing up here. That means the file has been saved. And make sure that Portainer data not date needs to be written. So that's a good double check. So it's going to be Portainer data. So I misspelled the date of this word. So make sure that it says Portainer data, and that's it. So right now we are ready to run this. To run the container using docker-compose file, you need to run like this. I'm going to do a sudo docker-compose up-d. That means I'm going to use a super user permissions, and I'm initializing docker-compose command. Once this command is initialized, it's going to go and look inside this folder between all these files and folders and try to find exactly this name. You're going to try to find the docker-compose.yml file. As soon as it finds this file, it's going to start it or initialize. That's what it up is here for. And space-d means it's going to run in the background without giving all the data in the front screen. Press enter, and if I've done everything correctly, it should start pulling the information, pulling the Docker image in chunks. And it says at the end, it says Docker container of Docker creating Portainer done. To double check that it's definitely running, I can write sudo docker ps, and it gives me a Docker and then gives me all the containers that are running. So it says container created 10 seconds ago, status is if 10 seconds running, and etc. If I run this command again, as you can see, it increments or increases in time. So everything is fine, is running. If something happens with the installation, instead of up 23 seconds, you might see it says restarting, and then in brackets it's going to be 1, 2, 5 or whatever. The number in brackets, this means that's how many times the Docker tried to restart the container. So this is running. I can go back in the browser, enter the IP address of the of this VM, followed by the 9000, not 900. 9000 IP address. And here we go. This is the Portainer initial setup screen. It's asking me to create a password, 12 characters or more. So let's quickly create a password. You can change the name. I'm just going to keep this as admin. I always keep default user as an admin for Portainer. Or you can change it to something more secure, something that you like instead of being an admin. And then create the user. And now I need to select get started because I'm not connecting this to any environment or anything. This is a standalone Portainer. I'm going to click get started. And that's it. This is the Portainer dashboard. We can close the latest news here, and that's it. This is all running. Next thing, what I need to do is just do a bit of housekeeping. It says local. I want to change that to something else. I click on environments, click on the local, and this is the name. I'm going to name it docker-yt. And it says public IP address. Right now it gives nothing. I suggest to enter the public IP address or IP address of the VM. and that will help you out in the future when you want to access the containers. So for example, I entered that one here. If I click update, I go to a stacks, Portainer. As you can see, there is a port 9000, and if mouse over, here on the bottom left-hand corner, you should see the showing up the IP address and then colon 9000. If I left nothing in here, if this wasn't in here, every time that I try to click on a port, this IP address here on the bottom here, left-hand corner will show 0.0.0.0 colon 9000. So by clicking that, it will not work. So that's it. This Portainer is running. Next thing, what we're going to do in this video is link the SMB to this VM to make sure that Docker will utilize the persistent storage. If I go to my Samba share, if I click on the service and Samba sharing, I have a ZFS folder being shared via Samba. Already already done a video with file service, how to share these folders, how to everything needs to set up. If you're using TrueNAS, you need to go through TrueNAS Samba configuration to share a folder. So I'm using a ZFS for this. So right now I'm going to go back inside the terminal. And first thing what I need to do is need to make sure that the tools called cif-utils are installed. To do that, I'm just going to type sudo apt install cif-utils. And cif-utils are responsible to connecting Samba share to this VM. And it says which one you want to let go. And there's default, select OK. It says cif-utils are installed. If I type cd space tilde, that will take me to my home directory from anywhere. As soon as you type this, it's going to take you back to home directory. And now I will create a folder here called NAS. So I have the folder called NAS created here. If I navigate into NAS, the location of this folder, PWD means print work directory. So it prints the output exactly your location. So home, Mr. P NAS. That's where we're going to mount this in. Next thing, I need to make sure that I know the NAS IP address. I'll go back to my LXC container that runs file server. If I type IP space A, I can see that it is 51. Go back to the terminal and sudo nano etc fstab. So sudo using super user, I'm using command nano or text editor nano, and I'm amending fstab. Fstab is a file system file that responsible for auto mounting stuff to your system. So we're going to add this one here. We're going to make a space. Let's say NAS. So /192.168.178.51, the IP address of the NAS /ZFS. I need to put exactly the same capital letters, etc. Or actually, no, share name is lowercase. I thought I'd done this in uppercase, so we're going to use a lowercase. Now space and then location, where do you want to mount it? In my case is home, Mr. P NAS space. What kind of file system we're going to use? We're going to use CIFS space user, and that means that I'm going to use user login credentials. And now you can link to a hidden file for your credentials. I'm just going to put them in a plain text. So I need to put user equals and what the username, and then user and then password, what the password is. So in my case, it's going to be Mr. P and 123 QWE, comma, no perm. No perm means that no permissions will be changed during the connection between the host and a Samba, and that all the files will not change the permission once they've been uploaded to a Samba and vice versa. And that is it. So if I press Ctrl X to close, Y to write, Enter to confirm. Another thing with the nano, let's say I will edit something here. If I press Ctrl O and press Enter, it will write the file, but it will not close the file. Now I need to press Ctrl X to close it. So now if I done everything correctly, if I put sudo space mount -a, that means that I'm running super user command. As a super user, I'm running the command mount, and it says -a is auto mount. Press Enter, and it's giving me a message. It says permission not working. So let me go and check what's going on. I found what the problem is. My configurations inside my file server wasn't really fully completed, so I had to just enable the Mr. P user to access Samba. So I just gonna run this command again. So sudo mount space -a, press Enter, no errors. And if I type df space -h, I should be able to see that this folder is actually linked to this folder or to this location inside the Samba, and it's over 240 gigabytes in size. So right now, from now on, every Docker container that I will run, I can go and represent or send the permission data or persistent data. Admin, come on, I can't even remember this password now. That's not good. Here we go, I'm in. So every container right now that I'm gonna run, I can choose where do I wanna store data. Let's say, for example, if I go into containers, actually under stack container, there is right now linked the mount volume is linked to local location, which is this. I can actually go right now and replace that to be actually linked into the into a Samba share. But for Portainer, it's not required. It's more things for like a Plex and other Docker containers that requires or will store a lot of data. Right now I can push that to be stored inside my NAS instead of being inside my Docker container, which is limited to 64 gigabytes in size. So this is how you set up Ubuntu Server VM inside your Proxmox, and how to set up docker-compoe and a Portainer. In next videos, we're going to start setting up some amazing containers that are quite useful for your home lab for your home lab setup. I can't speak anymore. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.